Good evening. I'm Joan Marshall, Director of the Bullock Texas State History Museum, and I want to welcome you tonight to the first in our distinguished lecture series celebrating women shaping Texas. I especially want to thank the Governor's Commission on Women for their sponsorship of tonight's program and reception, as well as Texas Women's University. And from the Commission, I'd like to recognize Lisa Lucera, Rita Kreisel, Connie Weeks, and could they please raise their hands? And from Texas Women's University, I'd like to thank Sharon Venable, Director of Corporate and Community Relations. Sharon, where are you? She must be out in the lobby. But tonight, there is no one better to introduce our speaker than Senator Jay Nelson, who is herself a Texas trailblazer. She is state senator from District 12, which includes portions of Denton and Tarrant counties. She is a businesswoman and former teacher who served 2 terms on the State Board of Education before joining the Senate. This session, she is the highest ranking Republican in the Senate. Please welcome Senator Jay Nelson.
Good evening. I am Senator Jay Nelson, and I am so glad to be here this evening with you to celebrate women who have shaped our state's history. Women in Texas during the 20th century made incredible strides in creating opportunities for our daughters and our granddaughters. Remember, it wasn't until 1918 that women were even allowed to vote. That is amazing to me that my grandmother, when she turned 21, could not vote. And, certainly they weren't serving in the Texas Senate. Now today, we have 7 women in the Texas Senate, and we have more than 30, we have more than 30 female representatives, and that number needs to grow. Another area where women have made incredible accomplishments is in education. Without education, I'm not sure any of our other achievements would have been possible. It is my honor tonight to introduce a true pioneer for women in education. During her tenure as Chancellor at Texas Women's University, enrollment has grown by 85%, and the university has received national recognition for its quality, value, and diversity. Since she took over in 1999, Texas Women's University has produced more than 20,000 graduates in many critical fields, including healthcare, engineering, and technology. She has raised more than $220 million for facilities, scholarships, and faculty development. In addition, she created scholarships for undergraduate students and established annual events that celebrate the wonders, truths, and mysteries of science, bringing exceptional alumni back to the university. I have to tell you, just from the bottom of my heart, I am so grateful to this lady for all she has done, not just for Texas Women's University, for women in Texas. I am just devastated that she is moving on, but I am so grateful to have the opportunity to be here tonight to ask you to give a very warm welcome to a dear friend and the President and Chancellor of Texas Women's University, Dr. Ann Stuart.
Well, it's my honor to be here tonight, and I'm so delighted with the people who are in the audience. Some of you I've had the chance to meet and to say hello, and I am, of course, grateful to Senator Nelson for taking time. I know you've got to run on a busy, busy day, and the House is still in session, and the Senate is doing other things. I also want to thank the Governor's Commission for Women. They do a wonderful job for recognizing what women do in Texas and what they have done. We are so pleased and proud to have the Hall of Fame. the Women's Hall of Fame housed in its permanent home at Texas Women's University in Denton. It was the wisdom of the governor to do that, and we think that that was a wise thing for him to do. I'm also so grateful to the Capital Area Former Students Association of Texas Women's University for helping in the reception and for hosting that for us and for me and for TWU, and so I'm so grateful to that. And naturally to the regents who travel this far to be here, I thank you. I spent some time in the exhibit, and if you have not been, I encourage you to come back and go through that. We were talking about it a few minutes ago. It isn't the visuals, I think, that touched me as much as it was the audio pieces, because as the portraits or the illustration is shown, those of you who have seen the exhibit know that you can push the button and then these voices come out and talk to you about what is seen in that picture or what has happened in life that brings them to this point. And the language is just gorgeous. I often think that when we have those series on PBS about the Civil War and the letters are read, that it is the words that are spoken that make such a difference. So it's that kind of exhibit. I hope that you all go see it, and I'm so grateful to be part of this series that celebrates that. I spent the morning at the Ann Richards School here in Austin for young women, and I remember that I taught school for a while, and I could never teach school today. They had more energy than I could imagine. They had more questions than I could answer, and they were just absolutely delighted and excited about everything that was ahead of them. I want to talk tonight about two things, and I'm not going to give a formal lecture. I'm just going to share with you some thoughts. But I want to talk about what education means to women. There are echoes here that you're going to agree with and know. There's nothing new or earth-breaking in these comments. And then I want to spend a few minutes talking about what I think education is going to be and how that is thoughtful for all of us who are either involved in it, or if you have children who are grandchildren or children who are involved in education, where I see it going. And I'm not going to try to give you answers, but I am going to challenge you to do some thinking on it, because I think it is an industry that is undergoing a sea change, and that we need to be aware, I think thoughtfully about what's happening. We know that all of us in this room know that what education really does is provide opportunity. I often say to the commencement addresses that we can't change someone's life. You have to do that yourself. You have to have the will and the talent and the commitment to do that. But what we can do is change opportunity. And that, I think, is done through access to education. I think it's the greatest gift, public education, that our nation can make to its citizenry. It's the change agent for opportunity, as I have said. And it begins with reading and computing. Most of us know that if someone cannot read, their learning is limited. Now, it isn't that they can't learn, but it certainly is stymied. We emphasize at Texas Women's University and our education program a reading recovery program, which is an intervention at first grade for those who are having trouble in reading. And it's because we have this strong philosophy that if students in first and second grade, it's that third grade test that comes up, cannot get that foundation, then they're going to be impaired for the rest of their experience. And secondly, we talk about financial computing. We have a financial literacy course at TWU that is required of all students. And I think that it is really one of the best things that we do. What it does, if you don't understand and you can't compute, then there is a world of mystery and misunderstanding about money and about debt and financing and rights and obligations, and they're all necessary for individual responsibility. I can't tell you the number of women, young women who go through this program. They're going to buy their first car. They don't read the fine print until we get hold of them. They don't understand about compound interest. They don't understand what it means when you get a $2,000 credit card charge, but you know you can only pay $15.71 and everything will be fine, and not realize that 22% interest is being charged on that remaining debt. So we spend a lot of time talking about those two things, the building blocks of education, which I think relate to reading, and I think they relate to math and, of course, computing and science. I also think that it's necessary to be supportive and champions of how early we can start this education. I don't care whether it is the 4-year-olds that the President gave in his State of the Union speech, or whether it is other early childhood programs that are advocated. But what I have learned to believe is that 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds, it's too late. And you have to, I often wish my mother were back and I could tell her, you know, I don't know all the things that you did for me between infancy and 6, but those were the most important things that you did. I remember few of them. I always think that those of you who are mothers, I am not, but it must be kind of sad for you that you do all of these things and your children, do you realize they don't remember them or didn't recognize them or don't have any cognizance about them as you're doing all these marvelous events and exercises for them. But I do think that it's important that we, in this country, in public education, make a commitment to before kindergarten. I used to think kindergarten was an early starting point. I now think it's probably 1 or 2 years too late. And at that point also, that we start emphasizing the hard courses. And in America, those hard courses have relate to STEM. And if you don't know STEM, that's forgiven because then you wouldn't be in education. But science and technology and computing and mathematics. So we certainly are focused on that at TWU, and we're focused on the legislature, the coordinating board, and every place else. Let me reflect on just these 2 themes that I'm going to carry forward for you. One, just what does education mean, I think, to us as individuals? And what it does for us. I've been in education as a working person for over 50 years. I've taught middle school and high school, college. Then I was a dean, I was a provost, I was president of a university before I came to TWU, and I've been now president and chancellor for 13 years. I've loved this profession, and I have loved the work that I do. Now, why? Well, I think that it's the single most important opportunity that we can give the people who are in front of us. I was a first-generation student. How many of you were first-generation students? Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? My mother and father, my mother had gone to a 2-year teaching institution She was born in 1903, so you can see the period of time that would be. That would be about 1920 when she was going. And they had 2-year teachers' colleges, and she had gone to that and then taught. Her first assignment was in a little, she was she was living in Kentucky, up in the eastern part where the hills are. She was in a one-room schoolhouse. In Kentucky, you could not teach if you were married. And so she had this first assignment, and you had to board with a family so they could watch over you. So she had a room in a house, but the bonus was that they had a horse. And the horse, she would get on the horse every day, and it would take her to school, and then the darn thing would go back home and come back in the afternoon and pick her up. I mean, it was kind of like a horse taxi, I guess. It was just amazing. But when she married my father, she had to quit working. Mother was not exactly committed to working, so she probably wasn't too sad about that. But my father had a technical school education. He was a civil engineer, but he had not from a 4-year college, so it was very important to them. They both knew the value of education, and they put me through an undergraduate degree, and what did that allow? Well, it gave me independence, which I think is, we talk about the value of education all the time, but what I always link it to is the independence that it gave me. It gave me independence to choose the career that I wanted. I wanted to leave town and find new adventures, and so I had a degree that I could go out and get a job and work in a different place. And so I had that, and I had a job that would pay enough for me to have housing and a car and all of those things. After a divorce, it gave me the ability to support myself and to do well in that. Later in life, it gave me the ability to care for my mother and to help her financially, because my father had passed away, and she lived to be 96, and she was in fairly good health, but all of those family issues come along about how you're going to care for each other. And all of those things, and the independence to do those things, were because Mother and Father had made sure that I had a bachelor's degree. Now, I went on with myself to accumulate a master's and a PhD and some postdoc work. But it was that foundation that they gave me, that you give to your family, that I think is the backbone of this nation and the backbone of what it makes the strong woman. And when you look at that exhibit downstairs, the first room talks about what women could do. Well, in the first audio, they could do nothing but keep house, because you were supposed to love being married, and you were supposed to love your children, and you were supposed to love to dust. And they have books telling you how to dust, and they're there, and how to sweep, and to have joy in doing that. Now that swiftly moves along to the fact that there were other things that you could do, because some technology came along and it talked about being a telephone operator. $15 a week, which was a lot of money then. But those were those telephone, do you remember those? Or did your grandmothers, or they would plug them in and take them out and make the connections? You could always listen in on what everybody was saying in town. But there were, and also seamstresses, and it talks about those 20s, before the Depression, before World War II. I know World War I was going on at the time. But that women were beginning to find ways to make monies for themselves and to be able to contribute to the household primarily. So if you look at that and you think that if women and girls can provide that kind of education, either for themselves or through the family, then they can find things that they love to do and pursue those. Now, it doesn't always work out the way that you think it's going to work out, and all of us know that about life. But that again, it's the education that gives you the option. I majored in literature. I majored in the 16th century. It was devotional poetry. And I minored in medieval linguistics. Can you imagine how thrilled my father was? Every semester he would say, and how are you doing? And is there a job anywhere for you? And are you going to get a teacher's certificate? And I said, yes, I promise I will. Well, somehow that worked out okay, and I taught for a while and then went on to college. And just as I had my classroom and I had my women students, because who else is going to take Milton and Spencer and Chaucer except the girl students that were there, had few men, although it was a co-educational university. Just as I could see myself, I wore my hair in a bun, and I was going to be the iconic literature teacher for probably the rest of my life. The 70s came along, and the doors opened for women. You could have entered law school before, but there were very few, as you would know, very few women in law school. There were very few engineers. There were very few architects. But because of civil rights in the 60s, all of it exploded. And it was all available. It was the most exciting time because anything was available for you to pursue. They fled the English departments like rats on a shelf. So I decided I'm going to be an old lady wearing my hair in a bun, and I'm going to be grading composition papers for the rest of my life. And rather than have to spare, because I had been educated, and because I knew that that gave me options, I marched over to the School of Engineering. And I said, you know, I understand you're doing a good job of educating engineers, but from the word I hear is that they cannot do documentation of computer languages through the first generation, second generation, third generation, so on. And I said, I can help you with that, because I have a minor in medieval linguistics, and medieval linguistics is a language, and I can know how to do structures. And he bought it. I never will forget the fact, I was so shocked. But there were no textbooks, so I had a chance to write textbooks. I had a chance to go off to Purdue for them to invite me to develop a curriculum for them, all because I had created opportunities for myself through educating myself, and also knowing that if I had that education and I was creative enough, that I could change my life and change my opportunities. Well, let's look at what's happening in the field today so that we can see how we might think about that and how we might manage it. Education is in flux. It's changing dramatically. These changes have been coming over the last 20 years, but what is different is the pace. And if we don't recognize it, and we don't acknowledge and think about it, it's going to overtake us in ways that I think we are not going to be pleased. So, if you look at that, it's going to be revolutionized because the pace is picking up in the next 5 to 10 years. What's happening? First of all, the role of the teacher has dramatically changed. Now, when you went to school probably, and when I went to school, or when I was a teacher, I was the seer, and the student was the learner. And it was wonderful. I knew more than they did, or at least I convinced them that I did. And I could talk to them about it, and they could listen and absorb, and then we somehow made a journey forward in understanding knowledge. Not today. Today, a student, because of technology, has more information at their disposal than we could ever, as a teacher, teach them. So our role totally has changed to be a facilitator, to be a guide, but not the person who brings knowledge, because the knowledge is in that little handheld, or it's in the tablet, or it's in the computer. It's not in the library, where they seldomly go, but it's through this internet world where they have facts and figures and knowledge available to them. What they, of course, have to decide is what of the information is true, what of it is not, and how do you make sense out of it. So the teacher takes on that kind of guide, but you know, that's a cultural change. I was listening to KERA, the public radio station, yesterday as I was driving home from work, and they had a doctor on who was talking about the change that doctors were going through with nurse practitioners. Now, TWU has a very, very successful nursing school, and we graduate many nurse practitioners. But this show was about the fact that the role of the doctor is going to become the specialist. Because in truth, almost everything that happens to us could be treated very well by a nurse practitioner in an office that they set up with hours that they can control, with equipment that is just as good as an outpatient hospital. But the interesting thing that the man talked about is whether the doctor can stand that egotistically, because the doctor has always been the guru in the room. And what is that going to do to the people who are in the profession and to the doctor who is coming along without that respect and without that awe and without that command? I think the same thing can be said about teaching. I loved the fact that I was bringing knowledge to my students. I don't think that works anymore. I think it's a different paradigm entirely. So what am I going to do if I'm a teacher? I've got to be able to manage it. It's harder to do, and I've got to help people understand how to cull and sort for themselves. What does it mean for the student? Well, in my generation, we accepted knowledge and we layered it. We would put down a foundation on a subject. We would go to the Tuesday class and learn something. We would go back on Thursday, add to that layer. It's almost like a geological cut in the earth. And we would build up that knowledge as it would layer upon one another. But that's not what happens today. The ground isn't laid. It's all of these facts that come in from a diverse source of places that the knowledge exists. And how do you make sense of it? As a student, how do you sort it? How do you cull it? How do you test it for validity? How do you test it for ethical and moral correctness? And if you don't have a base, you just have all of this that's swirling around you, and you and the teacher have to somehow learn how to make sense out of that so that you have an advancement of what you know. Now, what about methodology? When I was in undergraduate school, We studied independently. We might study with a friend, or we might review something. I build buildings now in this role of Chancellor. And the single most important thing besides classrooms and laboratories is student study space. Because everybody is learning in a team. No one, I don't know whether they ever study by themselves or not. If they aren't huddled together, studying and talking and discussing and team building and working as a team, I hated teamwork because I wanted the A and I wanted it all by myself. And I didn't want to share it with anyone. And I particularly didn't want to be part of a team where someone slacked and then the team would be graded and maybe someone else would get an A because 3 of us had worked really hard and 1 hadn't. But you know the drill. Walk in any corporate building today, and what do you see? You see cubicles rather than offices with doors. You see spaces where they gather together and talk and have ideas generate off of each other. The woman who has just stopped work from home lost the company right now, but anyway, she just had a national horror story because she won't allow people to work at home any longer. Because where was it? Yahoo. Because she wants the interaction of people up and down the hallway, stopping at the water cooler, and she thinks that ideas are generated that way. Well, it's not exactly a team concept, but at least it's coming back in that way. That isn't the way we learned, that isn't the way we produced, that isn't the way we worked. I did syllabus by myself. I was an independent learner and thinker. I think that people who are like that have a very tough time in this environment, and I think that universities have to be aware of that. Let's talk about the calendar for a moment. It's not going to last. You all know that education in America is built on an agrarian calendar. We start in September because that's when the crops were done. And we are out in the spring because you have to go home and plant. It doesn't make any sense any longer. Economically, it doesn't make sense. Schools are going to be open 12 months out of the year. The semester is going to disappear. It's already disappeared. The only thing that's keeping it alive is that no one can figure out how to do credit hours. And if you can't figure out how to do credit hours, in most public education, you can't figure out how to fund. In the state of Texas, we're funded on credit hour production. Well, if you don't have that, then how in the world are you going to figure out how much money you get? But it's not going to survive because today's student is not going to sit still for the fact that they have to wait to start in September or January or close in May. Everything is going to be just in time. It's moving that way so quickly. They want to take it when they want it, at the time that they want it, and in segments that are not built upon 16-week cubicles. So all of that is going to be revolutionized. And when you think what education is and was, you have to ask, what does the degree mean? The University of Wisconsin just passed, in the last month, the fact that you could test for every single course that is available for a bachelor's degree. And if you can pass the test, you receive a bachelor's degree without ever touching ground at the university. Now, we used to talk about the experience of going to the university, what that life experience was. I'm not sure that that's going to survive, except in the small, either component. I can see that, for instance, at Texas Women's University, in a small part, a special school within the university, probably for freshmen going through to a senior, but not for everyone. They don't want to sing in the choir. They don't want to go to the play. They don't want to go to the game. They want to get through. And they want to get through in the most effective and efficient way that can happen. So if you can get a degree by testing out, if you can get a degree by bundling, that's one of the new things that's going on. I bring to the registrar's office a basket of experiences that I have been credentialed on. I have some certificate courses here. I've taken some online courses there. I have some experiential learning someplace else. I've done it at 17 schools. Here, you take this basket and figure out if I can graduate from TWU with a bachelor's degree. And believe me, we are going to have to figure it out, because it's not linear anymore. I don't know what's going to happen. I hate to say this, Former Students Association. I don't know what's going to happen to alumni allegiance. It's going to be very hard to have alumni allegiance if you take a certificate course here, you take something else there, you have another experience, and then you bundle everything, and somehow you graduate. Although our credits could be part of someone else's bundle at someone else's institution. So what is college anymore? Well, we know what it was. Before World War II, it was this marvelous model, mainly private, and mainly a liberal arts education. After World War II, because of the GI Bill, and because of public education explosion, it became something quite different. Very co-ed, very public, and very much a door to opportunity. What is it now? If you ask any student who comes across orientation at TWU, they are not there for the value of a liberal mind. They are there because they want a job. And education is becoming, as many of you know, the pathway to employment. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. One of the things that we do at TWU is have a core curriculum, which at least encourages the fact that you would have a liberal arts core. You would read a book, for instance, before you could graduate. That might be novel. Or you would at least have heard of Voltaire or Descartes, maybe. Or you would take a music appreciation class, but you don't have to take those. You could get by without doing any of that. So the focus of today's student is often, I enter, I study, I graduate, and I get a job. Listen, I encourage you, to the commercials for colleges that are playing on your televisions. They only talk, they don't talk about educating the whole person. They don't talk about the liberal education. They don't talk about the value of the mind. They talk about, we can help you get the credential that you need to do the job that you want. High school students are coming to TWU with sometimes 2 years of college finished. Because we're doing, in the schools in the area, we're offering college courses in high school. So therefore, what does that mean about what college is and how it is so special? If you can take half of the 4-year degree while you're still, I just talked to the girls at Dan Richards School today. Many of them are testing out of at least a year before they ever go to college. Community colleges are looking like 4-year colleges. And Texas, in the legislature, is granting more and more the opportunity for those schools to give 4-year degrees. They look like universities. Collin College is up in our area. My goodness, they have the most gorgeous dorms you've ever seen. They have a student union that would equal Yale's. They have playing fields that are marvelous. It doesn't look like the community college of the past, which was some building, remember, with no real campus. And it was a place that you started or where you went to do technical education. Online universities. We can poo-poo them all we want to if you want to. But we need to be real about them. They are the fastest growing education entity that we have. And MOOCs, the free online courses that people can take and get credit for, University of Texas right here in Austin is offering that. There are 5 universities doing it. Stanford is one, UT is one. I've lost the others. But they have started a consortium where you can take the courses online at no charge. And that's the problem that they have, because they can't figure out at this point how to get back to the university. Once they figure it out, then a kid can sit at TWU, take a course from Stanford, take a course from Yale, take a course here, take a course there. And so what happens to the community that we used to think about as the life of the university? Experiential knowledge is going to be accredited, it already is. Certificate programs are going to be part of the bundling. And vocational, look how many industries are offering education inside the site. And then that is applied to a university for credit. So the ground is shifting. It is shifting at a speed that has never been in my lifetime, professional lifetime, and that's been over 50 years. And what does that mean for women? It means that women need to be really smart and aware of the changes. How many of you we've all been aware of the book, Lean In is the hot book of the month, meaning that women have to be more aggressive, that the thesis is that we tend to be well educated, but when responsibility is handed out in the industry, we lean back and let the man take the lead. And the book encourages us to lean in. I think women are going to have to figure out how all of this is working and be as aggressive, because women can be aggressive and they can be successful, and they are successful. But it isn't the old pattern. And in first-generation families, it's going to be harder. Can you imagine a child trying to explain all of these trends to a family that has never been to college in the first place? I think the majors are going to change. I just talked to some people at Celebration for Science at our school last week. And I said, you all are the heroes of the world today. It's all cyclical. But 20 years ago, it might have been another discipline. All the money is going to STEM. All of the scholarships, the big ones, are in science and technology and math and that that's where it's going to be in their young professional lifetime. And if they can find a way to be comfortable in those professions, they need to pursue them. I was an English major, I would not be today. I focused on literature, I would not do that again. I accepted discrimination. I can remember my chair coming and telling me that the dean had only allowed him to make one promotion in the department that year, and he was going to give it to my colleague who was in the next office because he had a wife and 2 children, and I was a single woman. And I accepted that. I was an idiot. And I accepted that and just went right on and went over and congratulated him. I don't know what was wrong with me. And I spent time wishing for love. Never would I do that again. In my generation, girls didn't go out at night with other girls. I can't tell you how many Saturdays I sat at home hoping and praying that the phone would ring and that it would be Frank or Sam or whoever it was that week who would ask me to go to the movies, and I would waste the whole day because I wanted him to call. And then I would stay home that night because he didn't call. Well, I wouldn't do that anymore. And I don't want girls to do that today. I want them to go learn something and do something and be somebody and have fun doing it and not wait. So I think the whole thing is a revolution. I think that it is going to be global and critical thinking is going to be important. But we come back to the full cycle that what education really does is to provide us with opportunity and provide us with knowledge, and it makes the difference for every one of us, whatever age we are. And I'm so glad that I'm in it, and I'm so glad that I have the chance to share with you this evening. Thank you very much.